Yisro is an interesting figure. I wrote about it a little bit in the newsletter. I encourage people to look in the newsletter. Certain thoughts that I said there, I don't think I can, say everything here. But the idea of Yisro, I say the Zohar says, for example, that he's the proper introduction to Kabbalah Satorah. That's why, even though there's a question whether it's out of place chronologically, but he is the introduction to Kabbalah Satorah, right? Everyone knows Parshas Yisro is Kabbalah Satorah. When we receive the Torah, there's the Dibros and everything, the big appearance of Hashem in front of the nation. That's Parshas Yisro. We call that Parshas Yisro, not Parshas Moshe or Parshas Yisrael. Parshas Yisro. Well, what is he doing there? And the same question actually could be asked on Shavuos itself. On the day of Shavuos itself, we read Megillas Rus. And in a sense, she, being a Gioris, is the introduction to Kabbalah Satorah. And that is obviously a remez to the fact that we, in order to properly receive the Torah, we have to give up all of our previous values in order to really appreciate the Torah's values. Every time we try to apply our own previous value system to the Torah, we kind of fall short. We'll never properly appreciate the Torah if we're always thinking with our old way, with our old system. That's why the Gemara says in Shabbos that one of the names of the mountain that the Torah was given on was Har Choirev. Why call it Har Choirev? Choirev is the same word we use for the destruction of the temple. Churban. It's a word, it's actually from the word cherev, sword, and churban, which is to destroy. So, why? Because the Gemara says, because Yarda Churval Olam, because on the day that the Torah was given, a certain destruction came to the world. What kind of a thing is that to say? The Torah is a beautiful Torah. The Torah is full of chesed. The Torah brings shefa to the world. How could we say it brought destruction to the world? Because of this idea that it destroyed the old way of looking at the world. Now, even if we do things like we used to do, let's say we don't steal, just like we didn't used to steal before. But it's a different kind of, there's different halachas. We have to learn the halachas of the Torah about how not to steal. Like, for example, there's a problem with waking someone up, gezel shena. I'm sure the Goyim never brought anyone to court for waking them up, right? They might have called the police to get them to stop making a party at 12 at night. But nobody ever thought they were really stealing something by waking someone up. The Torah says that's called stealing, right? That's taking someone's garment and even returning it, and even being sure that he would be happy with that is called stealing. If you don't have proper permission, that's called stealing. And that's one of the reasons why the flood of Noach occurred, was because they were trying to be smart and get around the laws of stealing, and people were destroyed because they were stolen from, and they were destroyed, their businesses were destroyed, etc. So the laws of the Torah, even in simple things like don't steal and don't kill, are not simple anymore. It's the Torah's way of looking at those mitzvahs. For example, don't kill includes don't embarrass someone in public, because the Gemara says that's like killing. That's similar to killing someone, because the blood goes away from their face or whatever, all those kind of explanations. But on a simple level, a person feels like they were destroyed. Right? A person who's embarrassed in public feels like they were destroyed.
Character assassination.
Character assassination, exactly. And people sometimes go through their whole life. They get shot at the entire day. Everyone's making another shot. Takes a pot shot at them. Another insult, another this, another that, and then we build up our armor, and we're insensitive to it. But it takes its toll, and it's not the way the Torah wants us to live our lives. So all these things, all these halachas, many halachas are just simple between man and his fellow man, which you would think I don't need the Torah for that. But again, the way that we would do it without the Torah would be very lacking. That's why the Goyim are always killing each other and so on and so forth, because they think that they're able to just be nice to each other, but eventually they get on each other's nerves, and then they double cross each other, and then things go like that. If a person's not careful with every single thing that he does with his fellow man, then even two partners, it happens all the time. People are partners, sometimes the brothers are partners, and then something goes wrong with the business, and they won't talk to each other. In my own family, I remember I had uncles that would never talk to my grandfather, because apparently the business went wrong somewhere along the line. So that's why the Torah says every single thing you say, you have to weigh out. Everything you do to someone, you have to try to figure out if it's going to hurt their feelings, if it's not going to, if it's onos devarim, you're not allowed to say something that's going to hurt someone's feelings. I mean, that's to the extent that we have to try to be careful. Very hard, not easy. You can't just do it because you say you're going to try to do it. You have to learn the halachas. You have to try to take stock of what you do. But that's why, in a sense, yard dechur v'la'olam. A whole system of trying to be nice and trying to be a nice guy, which works a lot of the time, but fails a lot of the time also, we have to throw out the window. We have to start from scratch. What does the Torah say about that concept? What does the Torah say about starting a business and bringing a partner and trying to take advantage of someone in business? There were businessmen who sat down to learn the simple laws of business that are in Shulchan Aruch, and a year later, a rabbi told them, this is what you should do. And they're like, well, no, and then they finally did it, and then a year later they said, we don't even understand how we ever used to run our business. The law, there's so many laws about how to do business and how to lend money and everything, every single little thing, and it's hard to even remember how we used to do those things without even thinking about the Torah. So that even simple things, right, that's why we spend as much time every day learning about the Torah, because every time we learn something new that can help us to be a little bit more of a mensch, Beino Chavero, or more, online with Hashem's ratzon. In any event, so that makes sense. Ruth, she gave up everything to come and join the Torah. So that's a proper introduction to receiving the Torah. Yisro as well. Yisro gave everything up. Rashi says in this week's parsha that it stresses that he came to the midbar. What's the actual pasuk? Just 1 second. If we can't find it, just 1 second. Here it goes. So there's a few other psukim. This is pasuk Hey. This is already the 5th pasuk in the parsha. Vayavo Yisro Chosei Moshe Ubana Beishto El Moshe. Yisro came together with all the children and the wife. El Hamidbar. They came to the midbar. So Rashi says, why did you tell me they came to the midbar? Don't we know if he came to join the Jews, they were already in the midbar? Of course. So he says, no. Rashi says, El Hamidbar Af Anu Yodim Sheba Midbar Hayo. Don't we already know that? El B'Shivcho Shel Yisro Di Berakasu. It's one of the greatest praises of Yisro that he came to the midbar. Because the Jews had to be in the midbar. Where else were they going to run away to? That's the only place to run away. It was the desert. Okay? But Yisro didn't have to come to the desert. He was at home in his nice, comfortable armchair and with whatever other accessories he had at home. Right? You all know all the nice comforts of home. Right? Shahaya Yoshe b'chavoda shalom. He was sitting with all the kavod, right? Even though he had left being a priest and he didn't have that kavod, but Mistama Rashi means that he had all the comforts of home, right? All the comforts of home and all the familiarity of your neighborhood and the people and how things operate. And then he left that. He left it all behind. Like people who come to Eretz Yisrael very often feel in a similar way. They've given everything up. They don't know anybody here. They don't know the way the system works. Right? In a sense, they've done the same Kiddush Hashem as Yisro. That he came, he left everything behind, and he came, why? To the Midbar Makam Tohu. To the Midbar, which is a place of Tohu. Just like it says the earth, the world started with Tohu Vavohu, like barrenness and nothingness. That's what the Midbar is. Right? The Midbar, there's nothing out there. There's only sand, as far as the eye can see. Lishmoa Divrei Torah. He came for one purpose, to hear Divrei Torah. Okay? So that's a tremendous praise of Yisro, that he gave everything up to come and join the Jewish nation and to hear Divrei Torah. And that's what the Torah says. If you want to really understand the Torah, leave everything else behind. Leave your concepts behind that used to think about things a certain way and try to approach it with a fresh page, right? That's why sometimes we don't call a person a chacham, like the Sephardim. I'm not saying they're wrong, but there's another term that we often use called Talmid Chacham. Why do we call our Chachamim Talmidei Chacham? Isn't that a bit insulting? We should call him a Chacham. He's a Chacham, right? Rabbi Eliashib was a Chacham. Well, why do we call him a Talmid Chacham? Because as wise as they are, they were still Talmidim. As wise as they were, every day when you sit down, it says every day it should be new in your eyes. Right? We see that in Kriya Shema. Hayom, every day should be like, oh, today's the first day that I'm learning Torah. Right? Even though, of course, Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of things we've already learned, and we can use those to help us in our learning. But in a certain sense, come with a freshness. Leave behind your previous concepts and say, okay, now how does it look to me? What's the simple understanding of this Rashi? What's the simple understanding of this Pasuk in Chumash? Let me hear the true message. Because otherwise we're thinking, I think this is what it's saying. Before we even let it talk to us, we've already decided what it's saying. So that's the first step. The first step is to sometimes just leave your concepts behind, and sometimes you actually have to leave comforts behind. People go to yeshiva. People in the old days for sure had to do that. Like Rabbi Akiva. What did Rabbi Akiva do? He had to leave his wife behind. He had to leave everything behind. For 24 years he left everything behind. Even he was originally going to do it for 12 years, and then he heard his wife say she would let it go for another 12 years. He went and did it for 24 years. 24 years he wasn't home. Gave everything up, like Yisro, in order to hear the Divrei Torah. And what happened? How did he make out? Was it a good wager? Was it a good cheshbon? Yes, he turned out to be the greatest rabbi who ever lived. Even Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand a lot of the Divrei Torah that Rabbi Akiva was saying when he was shown in a nevuah. Okay? So, and we consider in certain respects Rabbi Akiva was the greatest Rav who ever lived. So, of course, he had tremendous talents. It wasn't just the fact that he gave everything up, but that was the start. The start was he was willing to give up everything. His wife actually kicked him out. Now go learn. You said you were going to go learn. Now go learn. And she had the schus as well. That's what he said later. Shali shalah. Right? All of my schus belongs to her. So, of course, we need our cooperation of our better half to allow us to go away to learn, so to speak, even if it's not for days on end like they used to do in the old days, but at least when a wife says, okay, go learn, it's a tremendous milah. That's her big schus today, is to let him leave home and go learn. So that's a big step. That's a big step. And, but the idea of a ger, more specifically, is that they're giving even their nationality up. They're giving their entire being up. They're giving their entire way of existing. They're actually their DNA structure in a sense changes, right? The Gemara says that even after they're misgayer, theoretically certain family relationships that are forbidden in the Torah are permitted again because they're like a katan shenola. They're like a newborn child after they're misgayer. So a ger has a certain freshness, has a certain uniqueness that's what we've been saying, but to the nth degree, right? A ger accomplishes all of that even much more so than we ever could, because they become a completely new person. And that's the introduction to Torah. That's the introduction to receiving the Torah. Be like Rus, who not just gave everything up, but became an entirely new human being in order to receive the Torah. Be like Yisro, who also converted and became an entirely new human being. And also, it says, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, we have another story of a Gioris. What story do we have as soon as they came into Eretz Yisrael? What's the famous Haftorah of Parshas Pinchas? Rachav. Everyone knows the story of Rachav. Rachav was a madam, as they would call her, right? That she entertained the Canaanite men, Canaanite great generals. All used to visit Rachav. Rachav had a house of ill repute, which she used to run, right? So here is this woman who had been living a life which I would say is the exact contrary life of the Torah, and then she decided to do tshuva. She decided to be mitgayer. And who do you think she married? What kind of a shidduch do you think she got? Yoshua ben Nun. Now, Yoshua ben Nun was a great man. What's my proof that he was a great man? After Moshe Rabbeinu was nifter, who was the leader? Who was the leader? Yoshua ben Nun. That means that even though many say that he wasn't as great in wisdom as others that lived in that generation, with his mesiras nefesh for Torah, and for learning from Moshe Rabbeinu and for Klal Yisrael's Torah, put him in the lead position to be the leader. And then he's the one who brought them into Eretz Yisrael. It's a tremendous schus, and he led them. He's the one who actually helped us to settle and become a nation in Eretz Yisrael. And who did he do that with? Who was his partner? Who was his great partner in life? Rachav. He married Rachav, this woman of ill repute. How could that be? How could this great Torah leader? It's like, can you imagine, Rav Shach marrying Chveisvas, Barbara Streisand or something, I don't know, whatever. Of course, I'm not saying anything bad about Barbara Streisand, I'm just saying imagine a shidduch that you would be the farthest from your mind, right? She's Jewish, don't worry.
I would say it's not.
She was a classmate.
Okay, I didn't mean a direct parallel, I meant just to get us to think, to open our brains and think of what a shocking shidduch that was. A shocking shidduch.
Why?
It would be shocking for Rav Shach to marry some celebrity who all the people, all the generals have visited in their life. Okay? That's what Yoshua did. Now how could he do such a thing? A responsible leader of Klal Yisrael. What's going on? David, I'm shocked.
So am I.
The answer is, when a person does tshuva, especially a giora, she becomes a completely new human being. So he did not marry a woman who had been involved in ill repute. She was a completely new human being. And apparently she did it the right way, so he knew that her gerus was the proper gerus. Okay? So therefore, she's the best candidate. No averas, no anything, no bad background. We all know what her background was. No. And I don't even want to tell you what the Gemara says about her, how beautiful she was. The Gemara says something very shocking about how beautiful she was. It's shocking to find a statement like that in the Gemara, but it's in a Gemara, so you know it must be a holy sentence if it's in the Gemara. She was extremely beautiful, more beautiful than anyone you can imagine. Right? There was a reason why she was the most popular or whatever, right? And when she did tshuva, which any Baal tshuva has that schus of becoming a new person, but to the nth degree, a ger or gioris, that completely new human being, kakatan shenoy ladami. Okay? So then, Yoshua said she had such an earnestness to leave everything behind. Someone with such a reputation. And people say in Eretz Yisrael a similar thing happened in a certain degree when Uri Zohar did tshuva. Right? We had Uri Zohar actually spoke here once. Right? He was a famous TV comedian. Right? He was a movie star. He was a very famous movie star that all the secular Israelis used to look up to. And all of a sudden, he did tshuva, and he wrote a whole book about it. So if you want to see how he started to think about Judaism, how he came to Judaism, fascinating, the journey he went through. Right? It's actually comical in some places. Right? There was a whole party they went to, I remember, where he stole some figurines because he liked the way and he said, this person's so wealthy, he'll never notice them. Right? I'm sure we've all had similar thoughts when we go to like this wealthy person's house and they have so many things there, they wouldn't notice how he took one of them. And then as they were walking out, he showed it to his wife in the driveway. And she said, you better go back and return those things. He said, why? The guy's never going to miss them. He has plenty others of them. She said, you just did stealing. And she knew that was wrong. And to him, it was like, why would you say that's wrong? That's what we said before. Why? In their lifestyle, why would that be wrong? The guy's never going to miss it, and it's not really hurting anyone, and all of that. She refused. His wife was a big tzaddikus, apparently, at that time. I don't know if he stayed married to her later, but whatever. And she would not move. She sat down. She did a sit-in, right? She protested in the middle of all, and I'm sure you can imagine like all the paparazzi there with taking all the cameras and everything, how embarrassing that must have been for him. His wife sits down in the driveway of the party. They're leaving the party, and she won't move till it returns the figurines, right? And that made him think, why is she right? There are some real absolute things. You're not allowed to steal. It doesn't matter if the guy won't miss it, and the guy won't this, and the guy won't that. And it got him thinking. It's a very fascinating book. You should read it. And eventually he did tshuva, and that it was a complete tidal wave in Israel. It shocked everyone. The great secular movie star, right? Doesn't matter that in the world they didn't know, but in Israel it was a tremendous shock. And that's the same kind of shock that would probably happen in Eretz Canaan when Rachav was mitgayeret, right? And the same thing when Yisro was misgayer and Rus was misgayer. They weren't necessarily that famous, but the point is that is a shocking thing that someone give up everything, and even their nationality, and even all their family ties and everything, right? And become a Jew who wants to get close to Hashem. So that, the Zohar says, is actually the proper introduction to Kabbalah Satorah. Because in Shemayim, we don't realize these things, but that there had to be a spiritual readiness in Shemayim to give the Torah, right? And if we do a lot of averas, it can mess things up in Shemayim. Hashem doesn't want to give us all the good that He wants to give us if we start doing bad things. That's why, unfortunately, we see bad things happening in the world, because we've done things to sort of rearrange the system up there. Instead of things coming down like through the pipeline, someone put too much toilet paper in the pipe, right? It's got a blockage. It got a steam out. Okay, so you have to call rotor-rooter to get rid of that, to open up the pipeline again. So what opens the pipeline the best? When a person changes his life, when a person gives up everything he could possibly have of his personal interest for Hashem. And that's what Yisro did. Yisro gave up all of Avodah Zorah. Rashi says before, why was he surprised when his daughters came home so quickly from drawing water? He says usually it takes you hours and hours to feed the flock. Why? Because they never let them get in early, because he had gone away from Avodah Zorah. They gave his daughters a hard time. But came along Moshe Rabbeinu and saved them. So he said, oh, if so, then we have to help this man, invite him home, and then he eventually became his son-in-law. The point is that he gave up everything. Yisro gave up everything, both his job and his ideologies and his physical comforts and everything, and that did in Shemayim, that was the rotor-rooter. That was what opened up the passageway to give the Torah. Hashem says, there's such a person who's willing to give up everything because he loves me, because he wants the emes, because he wants to find the real truth in the world. That opens up all the pipelines. So the point is that this is why we call it Parshas Yisro. Even though there are a lot of other things we could have called the Parsha in which the Torah is given, could have called it Parshas Torah, or Parshas Moshe, or Parshas whatever, right? But Parshas Yisro, because that's the signpost of how to receive the Torah, and that's how every day we should get up in the morning and go, I want to be a different person today. I want to be a better person today. Yesterday I did this and this and this, and probably I'll just do it all again because that's just the way I am. No, I can change. I can completely do a makeover, as they call it today, right? And become a whole new human being. And therefore, I'm ready to receive the Torah anew. That's why every day we have to look at the Torah as being something new. Not just it's the same old, and right? It's a new thing. Somehow I have to look at the Torah every day as a new thing. Well, if I'm a new human being, then it's also a new Torah. I need to replenish my system of values. So that's another aspect of why we call it Parshas Yisro. Now there's another aspect as well, which is embodied in the Gemara in Pesachim. The Gemara in Pesachim says that, why do we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed in a quiet tone of voice? They say because Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say it, so we're not going to say it in a loud voice. But then Yaakov Avinu did say it, so they say, so therefore we want to say it. We don't want to ignore it. Okay? Now when did Yaakov Avinu say it? When he was ready to give over the nevuah of what's going to happen in the last days, when he was ready to say goodbye to his family, he was going to tell them everything was going to happen at the end of days, but Hashem hid it from him. So he thought he hid it from him because his children there's something wrong with his children. So he got all upset. Who amongst you is doing something wrong that doesn't allow me to say over this nevuah? But then they said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. They said, we believe in Hashem with all the proper emunah. And then he said, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed. Thank God, my children do have the proper emunah. And since Yaakov Avinu said it, we can't not say it. He responded to Shema Yisrael with Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed. So we have to say it also. We can't say it loudly. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say it. He just said Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Shem Echad, and then V'ahavta. He didn't say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed, so we say it quietly. So the Gemara says that's like a mushal. What's the mushal? We don't have a lot of time for the full version. The Bekitzer version, it's like a queen who had a taiva for a food. You know what food she wanted? The dregs of the pot. Right? It's like you have children, right? You have children, the good stuff is always the stuff on the top, right? But some people like the stuff on the bottom, stuff that's stuck to the bottom, that dregs, right? They say that stuff's really the good stuff, right? It's embarrassing, right? It's embarrassing to want the dregs of the pot. So what does she do? She can't forego them because she has a real craving for them. The Gemara says in Psachim Nun Vav Amud Aleph, I believe. If you want to look it up. Beautiful Agadata. And she can't do it openly because it's embarrassing. The queen wants the dregs of the pot. That's embarrassing. So she has her servants bring it in hiding. You know, they take the pot, they put it on there, and you bring it to the queen in hiding. Okay? So that's why we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam quietly. What a strange mashal. Isn't that a strange mashal? So I heard once a very nice pshat. That the pshat is Hashem craves the bottom of the pot. What does that mean? People who are very far from Hashem, but do tshuva. Hashem has a craving for that. Why would Hashem crave that? Why would Hashem crave that? Because that's the biggest kiddush Hashem. Someone who was so far from Hashem, and they turn their life around and they say it was all for naught. Right? There's a famous story in the Gemara of Rabbi Elazar ben Durdaya. Rabbi Elazar ben Durdaya, he had a hobby. He went around and tried every prostitute he ever heard of. Whenever you hear of a new one, you go, okay, bye, I'm going there for the day. Okay? He was a very lowly fellow. And one day, I won't go into the whole Gemara, he got very embarrassed. Actually, the prostitute herself embarrassed him. And he sat down, he started crying, he put his head between his knees, and he cried so hard, his neshama left his body. And a bas kol came out that he was going to Olam Haba. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he heard this story, he said, some people get their Olam Haba in one day, in 1 minute. They can get their Olam Haba. And he was jealous of this fellow. So why would he be jealous? What do you think? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's not going to get Olam Haba? Who was always going in the right path, never has. He never has that completely giving up everything that was dear to you and going towards Hashem. And that Hashem loves. He loves that. And that's the pshat, and that's why there's a craving for that part of the lowly part of the pot, because it's so beautiful, such a kiddush Hashem. So, okay, we'll have to finish another time the full thought, but that's the idea of Yisro and Rus and even Rachav, and that's the way we have to try to run our lives also. That every day I have to say, there are things that are dear to me that I know are keeping me from Hashem. I have to be like Rachav. I have to be like Yisro. I have to be like Rus, and give it up and go to Hashem. And when I do that, Hashem loves that. He loves that more than anything else in the pot. And it will bring the world to a receiving of the Torah once again. Right? This opens up all the pipelines for the shefa that we need so badly. There should be no more accidents and no more piguim and no more bad surprises. We get up in the morning or we turn on the news. Hashem should only give us good, and hopefully, Bezrat Hashem, the greatest good, Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Marav.